Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're taking a look at some of the most recent controversies that are going on through F1. And this video is mainly based around the fact that F1 has a huge problem. It has a big glaring problem, a huge amount of bias. And there's a huge amount of corruption that is certainly being spread throughout the sport. We're going to dive into it today. Johnny Herbert addressed the Verstappens with FIA sack plot also uncovered. So what's going on here? We know Johnny Herbert was fired after he was doing an amazing job of holding drivers accountable, drivers that feel like it's okay to drive like lunatics. Johnny Herbert has spoken out for the first time since being sacked as an FIA steward, and he hasn't minced words about certain people he feel had an impact on his firing. So who had an impact on his firing? Who influenced that decision making? Because you'd think that the FIA had a genuine reason. You'd think that they had a reasonable reason. You would hope that they perhaps didn't have any outside influence on firing Johnny Herbert. Namely, Herbert is discussing allegations of bias that was lobbed his way by the Verstappen family during a contentious 24 season that saw the Dutch driver go head-to-head with Briton Lando Norris. Interesting. The Verstappen. You tell me that the Verstappens were the ones who campaign and protest, but also protest to whom? So it's saying here that Johnny Herbert points finger at Verstappens for sacking. Notice this says Verstappen, the family, not just an individual. For years, former Formula One driver Johnny Herbert has balanced a punditry career alongside an occasional role as an F1 steward, or should I say FIA steward. But rising tension throughout the 2024 season brought to light allegations of bias. In his role as pundit, Herbert never shied away from making his own opinion known, and that has often involved a certain level of preferences towards drivers of his own country. Well, that's what the article is saying. It's the article. The article is also saying that apparently, often it's involved a certain level of preference towards driver of his own country. Yet in 2024, as Britain, Lando Norris looked to have a shot at battling Dutch driver Max Verstappen for the championship, Verstappen began to wonder about the bias within the FIA, particularly regarding the race stewards. Verstappen raised some legitimate concerns, apparently. His threat within the sport, his treatment within the sport. His treatment within the sport has been phenomenal. The FIA and Formula One have treated Verstappen with kitten gloves. They've pampered this man. They've made him got nowhere with so much. It is unprecedented. The blatant disregard and favoritism towards Max Verstappen is so obvious, even a blind person could see it. Now, that's just my own opinion. Let me know what you think. But the article goes on to say, particularly when he faced harsh penalty from FIA stewards who've been vocal in criticizing his driving. I see. I get it. It's not like it's one person who's criticizing his driving. Well, wait a minute. Everyone he raced has criticized his driving. Everyone Verstappen has raced against in a competitive manner has criticized Verstappen's driving. Verstappen's driving has been criticized since the moment he got in the sport. Remember now, we all know what the Verstappen rule is. Moving in braking zones, moving all across the straights, zigzagging, dangerously trying to keep the car behind, brake checking Lewis in Saudi Arabia. But early in his career, the Verstappen rule came in. And that's like 7-8 years ago. Come on now. So Verstappen has been driving like a lunatic for a very long time. But whenever people hold him accountable or try to hold the driver accountable, as all drivers should be held accountable, Verstappen cries victim. His family cries victim. His dad cries victim. He cries victim. And they pretend like they're victims. So the article goes on to say, it doesn't come from within the FIA initially, Herbert told casinoapps.com. It was all to do with a chitty chatter to the FIA that made them change their point of view. A chitty chatter. Who could he be referring to? I wonder. Of course, we all know that there's probably 3 potential chitty chatters. Helmut Marko. Yeah, we know he'd got a big mouth. Christian Horner. We know he's got a bigger gob of a mouth. And Max Verstappen father. You know, that guy. You think his son has issues. No. The issues came from his dad. Now, according to Herbert, and here's a statement, a quote. Everything I've done all year long in 2024 had been discussed and accepted to the point where 2 days prior to being fired, he had been told that his position as a rotating FIA steward was safe for 2025. So as far as he was aware, he was doing his job as it's supposed to be done. Wow. I wonder if he should sue them for wrongful termination. And yeah, who's going to hold the FIA accountable? I said it in my previous video. Formula One has a big, fat, gaping problem, and that is the manipulation of this sport. The control that the Verstappen seems to have over the sport and the things they get away with begs the question, what kind of corruption is going on in this sport behind closed doors? What kind of favoritism? There's no doubt that there's been a lot of favoritism towards Verstappen and his family, especially in the most recent years. And you know, I never see that changing until another driver of the same status or similar background comes along, like George Russell. Notice how Max reacted to George Russell, because I felt like it was the first time he ever had to deal with another version of himself, someone who's ready to stand up and fight the Verstappens just like how they fight everything else and fight everyone else. George is like, I'm going to give you a taste of your medicine on track and off track. And you know why? Thank goodness for George, because he's the only driver out there that is really ready to get his elbow out. Like, he's really ready to play that card, use all of his privilege, just like Verstappen and his family use all of their privilege to play victim and to get what they want to get done. George done the same thing and got pole position last year. That's when George went to the stewards and argued about Max holding him up. I can't even remember the race. Was it? I can't even remember the race, if I'm being completely honest. It might have been the Sakir Grand Prix, but I really can't remember the race. But Verstappen got a strange penalty. Everyone will admit it was a one-place grid drop. Don't think we've ever seen that for holding up George Russell. But I'm glad George did that, because for the first time, the Great White Hope met another Great White Hope. And I'm like, holy shit, this is wonderful. Because for a long time, they've been getting away with a lot of stuff. And it's because they haven't had another version of Verstappen. Now the sport does. And what did Verstappen come out and say? Your FIA friends. I hope you're happy. Your FIA friends. George has FIA friends? Max, but your family has FIA friends. I love this. So that's my point. You know, the Verstappen seems to have a lot of control over the stewards. And if drivers can have a lot of control over the stewards, and their families can have a lot of controls over the stewards, or the FIA, or the Formula One sport or organization or company itself, that's a big problem. It is a big problem, and it's a problem they're not willing to fix. But I'm glad people like Johnny Herbert is making it clear. I'm glad people like George Russell is giving him a taste of his own medicine by saying, oh, you wanna play that card with the FIA? I can play that card too, Max. Because it's using the Verstappen's trick against them. And they haven't felt that. They haven't felt that in a while. Because there hasn't been another Great White Hope in a while. So the article goes on, and the statements from Herbert goes on to say, I understand how everything came about, but I'm not going to point the finger. No, please point the finger. Tell us what's going on. He went on to say, but as I said, there were certain people who did actually speak with the president of the FIA, and that's why the president finally made that decision to get rid of me. Wow. I hope he sues them. I hope he sues them for wrongful termination. I hope more comes out. Because you see the control that the Verstappens have over the stewards, the FIA president. Holy crap. No wonder why they got away with Abu Dhabi 2021. Look at the control that they have. And they continue to get away with it because everyone's too afraid to call them out. George Russell is the only guy who has stand up to Max Verstappen and stand up to his family and said, you can fuck right off. You've been using all the power you have to manipulate the sport. I'm going to do the exact same if that's how you want to play it. Thank goodness that George is standing up to the Verstappens. Herbert went on to ridicule his inability to support British drivers as ridiculous. He went on to say the Verstappens keep intimating there's bias. I keep reading about the supposed bias, he said, regarding the ongoing discussion about British bias. Well, first of all, every country has bias. What about Dutch bias? What about French bias? All the countries that have drivers on the grid or have a race on the grid, what about their bias? You want to go to Netherlands and look at what they write? Go to Netherlands and see what their Formula One media write about other drivers, write about Lewis. Oh yeah, there's British bias. There's also Dutch bias. Maybe we should talk about Dutch bias. Everyone's got bias. Every country's got bias. But does Herbert have a bias? I honestly don't know. I haven't paid full attention to it to even notice that. But what I have paid attention to is the unfair advantage that the Verstappen seem to have over the sport and the puppets that they control. So the statement went on to say, I read that and then wondered, so I can't support a British driver because I'm British. I can't support Lewis or George or Lando. It's ridiculous. It is ridiculous. It is bloody ridiculous. Because like I said, everyone has bias and everyone is allowed to support whoever they want to support. If you want to get pundits or commentators who are not biased, well, how the hell are you going to do that? You're going to have to get a human that is not from Earth. Because every human is going to have a favorite. They're going to have someone they like, someone they don't like. There will always be a bias. But the bias being based on nationality, well, you can be biased and you cannot have the same nationality. The statement went on to say, but coming the other way is fine apparently, as in the case of what happened with me, he explained. If you're a Dutchman, you can sort of have a go at the Brits and say the Brits have got no real morals for how they are as race fans. It's supposed to go both ways, wasn't it? I get what he's trying to say. Because like I said, everyone's got bias. I'm sure the Dutch have a lot of bias. Oh yeah, Netherlands. Yeah, we know plenty about them. Now, truth to be told, this has been stirring for a while. Ever since Herbert got fired, ever since he gave Verstappen accountability, ever since he kept Verstappen accountable and gave out, decent penalty in the Mexican Grand Prix. Yeah, we knew it was a matter of time because we were like, ain't nobody has held Verstappen this accountable. So it was a matter of time. Now, last season, Herbert put himself on the front line of the Verstappen's title fight as he publicly chastised the driver for his on-track antics against Lando Norris. There was a lot of antics. Verstappen was wilding. In the Mexican Grand Prix, in the Austrian Grand Prix, he was wilding, fam. But funny enough, reading these articles from planetf1.com, I feel like even the people who are writing these articles have a bias. Can you tell? Can the people that are listening to me, can you tell that they do have a bias? Everyone's got a bias. Whether you're speaking, writing, whatever, you've got a bias. I'm biased against Lewis Hamilton. Of course I'm biased. And if you don't like it, you can fuck right off. Because you're biased against someone as well. Everyone's got a bloody bias. But like I said, Verstappen just love playing victim. They just love crying and playing victim. Now, this article went on to say, clashing in Austria, Austin, and again in Mexico, Herbert called out Verstappen's horrible mindset after penalizing the Red Bull driver 22nd at the Mexican Grand Prix where he was a steward. That 20 seconds should have been way more because Verstappen was literally driving out of bounds. The man looked like he was ready to put Lando in a wall. He ran his car right off track. Can't remember the turn, but just before the S's, ran both cars right off track, giving Lando no opportunity to go into the left because Verstappen was on the left. Yeah, nasty driving from Verstappen all over the place, but no one can hold him accountable. Article went on to say, Verstappen's driving style was harsh, especially when he's taking a fellow driver off the track. See what I just said? Yeah, that's what he loves doing. When he's overtaken, he takes you off the track. He pushes you off the track. And you dare do the same thing to him and see how he reacts. I'm glad George Russell did that to him in Baku a couple of years ago. George showed him a piece of his own. You know how long George has been waiting to go toe-to-toe with this guy? And it's funny, last year, after George got that pole position by protesting to the stewards, in the actual race, George did not have a good start. And I remember hearing some people saying George got scared. I'm sorry. I ain't never seen George scared. He wasn't scared when fighting Max a couple years ago in Baku, in Spain, when they got out the car and Max was swearing at him. When Max was complaining to him, he just walked off. He didn't care. Yeah, George Russell is not the kind of guy who gets scared. The man had a bad start. He had a bad start the last race. But hey, like I said, everyone had a bias. So the people that I was listening to complaining and saying George got scared, they had a bias. I can't wait until George is more competitive to keep up with Max because it's going to be fireworks. I know he wants to hold Max accountable as well. I know he does. I can't wait to see that. Watching these two is gonna be epic. I've said it many times. It's gonna be epic, but still, this sport has a big problem. Should people from the outside be able to influence the sport's decision? The stewarding, the FIA, Formula One, the governing body? It's a disgrace. That's what it is. It's a disgrace. So the FIA has a bias. So let me get this right. While you complain to the FIA about others having a bias, the FIA has a bloody bias because they listen to you, but they wouldn't just listen to anyone. And they've been listening to the Verstappen and favoring the Verstappens for a while. Herbert went on to say, "It's an absolute no-no from me, current drivers, former drivers, and stewards." He went on to say, "I'm such a big fan of Verstappen, and it frustrates me massively when he drives the way he did in Mexico. He doesn't need to do it. He's so good in the cockpit, and at this point in the championship, he could just need to stay out of trouble and drive as well as possible." That's what Herbert had to say. Article went on to say it wasn't the first time nor the last time that the now former FIA steward had something to say about Verstappen, so much so he was forced to deny accusations of bias. You see what I mean? You see what I mean when I say this article is biased and the people who are writing it is biased? Because the article says so much so he was forced to deny accusation of bias. What do you mean deny? Maybe he's telling the truth. How do you know he's denying? So that's what I mean. Everyone has a bias. I'm proving that this article and the people who are writing it have a bias. The FIA has a bias. I have a bias. You have a bias. Everyone has a bias. The Verstappens need to shut the fuck up. Maybe if they focus more on racing cleanly, they wouldn't be in all of these controversies. He went on to say, "I'm an opinion pundit, but when I'm given penalties, I'm not biased," he said. And it's true, Verstappen should have gotten a lot more penalties for the way he's been fucking around. Now we do have some good news, some rather good news. Susie Wolff versus Ben Sulayem for FIA president. Not an April Fool's. That is true. It's not an April Fool's. And today is also not April. It's the 1st of March. But it's true. This is some rumors that's been going around lately. And I think everyone who doesn't support Verstappen's would be happy for a new steward. Sorry, for a new FIA president and new stewards. Well, let's get back Johnny Herbert. That would be hilarious. If Susie got this job, got by Johnny Herbert, that would be impeccable. And and finally, maybe Verstappen would have to drive cleanly, like a normal fucking human being. The current FIA president and the billionaire Wolffs have a long-standing beef, exacerbated by a controversial inquiry into a potential conflict of interest. Late in 2023, Ben Sulayem initiated an investigation into a possible conflict of interest between Susie Wolff, who leads the all-female F1 Academy, and her husband, Toto, who heads Mercedes F1. So yes, basically Ben Sulayem accused Susie Wolff and Toto of sharing information that shouldn't be shared. It was a big accusation to accuse Susie of. It was a huge accusation, and Susie's way of response was classy, professional, blunt, and made it clear. But honestly, let's hope we get her in as FIA president. But also, there will be big questions about that. There will be big questions around that, whether or not there is conflict of interest, because Toto is her husband, manage and part owns Mercedes AMG F1 racing team. That's going to be a big conversation topic. So it's very unlikely that this will happen, but the simple fact that it is potentially possible, that's a huge benefit. But who gets to make the decision of who becomes FIA president? Well, in my opinion, it's whoever is putting the most money into the FIA. The FIA as sponsors. Whoever is the biggest sponsor in the FIA will have huge decisions to make. They will have huge power within the FIA. Ben Sulayem and his people are putting huge amount of money into the FIA. That's why he's president. He didn't just become president randomly. There's randomly this guy out of nowhere that no one seems to like. Even other people in the FIA don't even like him. He becomes president. No. It's because he has the money. He has the botkin. He has the money. His people have the money to sponsor the FIA and then make decisions and make demands. Now, I'm not too sure that Susie has that sort of funding or that sort of support, because money talks. Cash is king. So only time will tell. We'll really see what happens. But I'm curious, do you agree that this is a big problem for the FIA. It's a big problem for Formula One, you know, because this questions their integrity, especially since Abu Dhabi 21, where they blatantly, in front of over 100 million people, live, stole Lewis Hamilton championship in front of his eyes and gave it to the young kid Max Verstappen. Well, he's not a young kid anymore. He's not a kid anymore at all. He's a grown-ass man, but he acts like a baby, so, you know, all you got to do is just give him a dummy. All you got to do is give him a pacifier and hope that he shuts the fuck up. So thank you for watching. Subscribe, leave a like, and I will see you in our next video. Peace.